friends, acquaintances, and internet randos to a video literal years in the making. That makes it sound a lot more dramatic than it is, but we're going with it. Today I bring you a ranking of all of Ruth Ware's books. I did a book like this last year with Riley Sager, where I ranked all of his existing books and then did a reading vlog of his new release and then slotted it in to the appropriate position in the ranking. And I enjoyed it so much that I figured, why not do it again? So for the past couple of months, I've been catching up on all of Ruth Ware's backlist in anticipation of her newest release, The It Girl. So what I'm going to do now is go through all of Ruth Ware's books in publication order, not in the order that I read them, and we will discuss each one along the way. The first book that Ruth Ware ever published was In a Dark, Dark Wood. This was published, notes on my phone, in 2015. It has an average of 3.72 on Goodreads with 28,000 ratings. This was the third Ruth Ware that I ever read, which is why I bought it, because I love this cover. It's all textured and I thought I was in for a good time. If there has been one thing that doing this video has taught me, it's that I don't like Ruth Ware as much as I thought I did. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I read this in 2020 and I gave it 3 stars, but my notes on it are like, I don't remember what happened. I remember very specific scenes of like running and the cabin that they stay in, but virtually nothing else. This is about a bachelorette party gone wrong where someone dies. I think it's one of those where you know someone's dead, but you don't know who it is until pretty late in the book. And overall, I think this is just really not memorable. I think I've read a lot of thrillers like it. I'm not mad at it, but it's definitely not something groundbreaking. Though maybe in 2015 it was. Because it's a 3-star, just put it in the middle of the board, I guess. It's definitely not a bad book, it's just not one of the good ones. Then after that we have her big hitter, The Woman in Cabin 10. This was everywhere when it was released. It must have been picked for some prize or something because it was literally everywhere. This came out in 2016. It has a Goodreads average of 3.73, which is almost exactly the same as the last one, but it has 49,000 ratings, which is basically double and the most of any of her books. Sorry, I'm dumb. It's actually 490,000. So 10 times more than what I said for the previous book too. That makes sense. So I was just thinking that seems really low, but no, 500,000 is much more in line with the hype that that book got. I rated it 4 stars and I read it in December of 2018. So this was the first Ruth Ware I ever read because I couldn't get away from it. And I remember a surprising amount for having read it 4 years ago at this point. I remembered having some really interesting writing and some really interesting plotting. There are certain scenes that I remember pretty well. There's a nightmare that the main character has that I can't stop thinking about. But I also know that a lot of things bugged me about it, particularly right at the beginning. Something is set up to like be a big deal. It's going to be some sort of callback later on. And it just never was, and that really bothered me. It felt like it was left over from a previous draft and just hadn't been edited properly. But this one also had a lot of fun and excitement and some good twists in it, so I understand why it was so hyped. I'm torn though, because I don't know how much I trust my memory, and I feel like I have a lot more ill will toward this book than other ones. Like I just have very strong feelings about it. But I think that can also be the sign of a good book. So not that it's much of a competition, but it is in our top slot for right now. The next book is The Lying Game, which was published in 2017. It has a 3.54 average rating, which is the lowest of any of these, and it has 147,000 ratings. This is the one that I read most recently in anticipation of this video, and it was the worst one. There's really nothing good that I can say about this. I can see it has a lot of elements of things that Ruth Ware does really well, but this is just not an example of them. The big issue with this is that it doesn't live up to its premise. It's called The Lying Game. It's talked about early on that it's about these girls who are in a boarding school and they play the lying game, which is basically you lie all the time and there's sort of a point system, but the points don't really matter. It's like who's lying? And I always wanted that to be a bigger part of the story. It feels like there's a lot that you could do with that. Reveals on reveals. there's some foundational truth that we've believed the whole time that was just a lie for this game. Like, it could be really interesting, but it ended up being a really standard thriller with like an over-the-top ending for no reason. This one also starts off the exhausted mother trend. The child in this would not stop crying and getting in the way of the plot, and it was super annoying. I just like really didn't have a good time with this one, and I would have DNF'd it if it wasn't for this video. And it's nice to see that the ratings line up in the same way, that like no one liked this. So not surprisingly, it is at the bottom of our ranking. Next, published in 2018, we have The Death of Mrs. Westaway. It has a 3.82 with 143,000 ratings. This is actually the first book that I read this year. It was the result of a video, I'll link it down below, and I didn't enjoy it. This is probably the beginning of the end for my relationship with Ruth, where people had said that if you like The Turn of the Key, you would like The Death of Mrs. Westaway, and I super did not. I gave this one 2 stars. I think that it tried to do some stuff, but it didn't have enough plot to fill out a whole novel. This is the story about a woman who is down on her luck, and she receives a letter that her grandmother, I think, has recently passed and left her some stuff, and she has to go back to the family home to get it. But she thinks this is obviously a mistake because her grandmother's been long dead, but she needs the money, so she goes to like figure out what's going on. But can I tell you the amount of pages in this book that were taken up by her being like, I'm gonna go. No, I'm not gonna go. It's wrong if I go. But maybe I should go. Like, just make up your mind. It feels really bloated because there's not enough stuff in there. I really don't have much to say about this book. I think I remember it fairly well, but I think that I also skim read a good amount of it. Next up is her 2019 book, The Turn of the Key. One of my favorite thrillers of all time, I think. It is rated a 3.94 with 207,000 ratings, which is the highest rating of any of the books. This is the book that exemplifies what Ruth Ware does so well, which is atmosphere. It's really present in The Woman in Cabin 10. Like that book is just atmosphere and like great vibes. This one, the setting in it is so incredible. Ruth Ware seems to have a thing about crumbling old houses or boarding schools, or this one's about Oxford, so just old buildings in general. And this one features a house in the Scottish Highlands. Hey, I got that right. That is half crumbling castle and half glass techno house. And that is just everything that I want. It was so creepy in this. This is probably the book that I've been the most scared in, like the most tense. I know that she writes thrillers, but they're not edge of your seat kind of things. And this one wasn't really either. It was just that the atmosphere just like digs into your soul. That's really melodramatic. But that's what I find. When Ruth Ware leans into the atmosphere, the book is better for it. This is about a nanny who goes to take care of some children and live on the property, and spooky stuff is happening. The one thing that does fall short with this book is that it is written as a letter. You know at the beginning that the main character is in prison because of something that happened. It looks like you don't know what happened. Oh, that she's guilty of murder. Okay, so you know that. But you don't know who or what or why, and she is writing this letter to a lawyer. And it's the whole book, which is kind of silly. I understand why she did it, and I appreciate the commitment to the bit, but it didn't work. But everything else in this book worked so well. I think about it all the time. This was the second Ruth Ware I ever read, and it is the gold star of a Ruth Ware book. In my mind, nothing can replace it. I would be very shocked if any book that Ruth Ware writes in the future will top this. But I do also want to acknowledge that it's been 3 years since I read this. My memory might be a little bit hazy. I might just be blinded by fangirling, but I think that this is an incredible book. It's going right on the top of our list. Welcome back. We had to take a brief intermission to charge our battery, but we're good now. If I'm not mistaken, the next thing we have to talk about is One by One, which was published in 2020. It has a 3.73 average rating with 133,000 ratings, And this one I heard a lot about. It was very divisive for a lot of people, and I totally understand why. This is a good story, but some of the choices made in making this a book are baffling. The big thing for me is that this is on an ensemble cast. It is a company retreat in the French Alps. There are about 10 people in the company and then 2 people working at the chalet, but there are only 2 perspectives, which it just doesn't make any sense. But there are a lot of good things in this one, particularly the atmosphere, the French Alps. They describe skiing a lot, and I found that really immersive and really interesting. It's just the actual mystery of it isn't great and incredibly easy to solve. I have warmer feelings about this one though. I feel like the good parts of it are really good. It's just that certain things drop the ball. But it's not like Mrs. Westaway where nothing is really redeeming. This at least has really good atmosphere and really good writing. I think that she is improving as a writer as books go along. This one's hard to do a ranking for because I gave it 2 stars, but I think it is better than In a Dark Dark Wood, so I'm gonna put it above that. Which brings us to the It Girl. This is brand spanking new. I believe it came out last month. And at time of recording, it has 13,000 ratings and an average of 3.97, which is the highest of any of them, but it having been out for so short a time, probably the people who are getting it are ARCs and people who already really love Ruth Ware. This is also her 7th, so I don't know if people are going to be starting here. There is one book that we're not going to be talking about, which is called Snowflakes. This is an Audible original short story, and I just don't have access to it. I'm not going to give Amazon any money, so put it out of your mind. It's not happening. So now we're going to start the reading vlog portion and see where this slots in. Just kidding, we should talk about some common things that I've discovered from reading all of Ruth Ware's stuff. I've already talked about the number one thing, which is her atmosphere and her affinity for old houses. Her books almost always have a single female narrator. One by One, I think, is the only one that has 2, and it didn't work, so this one's back to a single one. And they often feature a dual timeline. 5 out of 7 of the books start with the. Don't know if that means anything. She is very British. I think all of her books are set in Britain. One by One isn't, but I think other than that, everything is set in the UK. She has also started doing more retellings, which I think is interesting. I don't know if anything other than the ones I'm going to mention are retellings. They definitely could be. But The Death of Mrs. Westaway, while I don't think it's a Rebecca retelling, I think it is certainly an homage. The old house there, the way that they talk about it, is very reminiscent of Manderley. And then the book she published right after that is The Turn of the Key, which is a retelling of The Turn of the Screw, like a pretty direct retelling. And then One by One is a retelling of And Then They Were None. Definitely not in much other than the idea of an isolated setting. People are getting killed off one by one. And generally I think that those are better. I don't know if it's just because it's newer and she's getting better at stuff, or if a retelling is where she feels comfortable. I'm pretty sure that this isn't a retelling. I haven't heard anybody say it is, but if you know, let me know. Here is the list where it stands, and now we can go ahead and get into the reading vlog portion. Hello, welcome to the vlog portion. Today we are starting on The It Girl by Ruth Ware. I gotta say, not super stoked about it. It's over 400 pages, and I read like the first page or 2 in the bookstore, and I wasn't really feeling it, but I'd already read everything that Ruth Ware has published, so I'm kind of locked into this video already. I can suffer through one more book, and I really don't know what this is about. My impression is it's a 10 years later, we're figuring out the truth of it. It's about people who are at Oxford together and murder, potentially. I don't have the audiobook for this one either. That's been my preferred method recently. I have been struggling to focus, so the cards aren't stacked in this book's favor, but only one way to find out. It doesn't look like this book has parts, which is usually how I would update you on a thriller, but every 100 pages, let's say. here she's talking about how she loves books, basically, and she says a bad thing might happen on page 207. That was true. So is something bad going to happen on page 207 in this book? It's taking everything in me to not flip to it immediately. So we'll find out. Bonsoir. It has been threatening to rain all day and so far nothing, but I just keep watching. I have made it to page 98 of The It Girl. Side note, when I was picking this up, I didn't know if it was The It Girl or The IT Girl, and those would be very different books. I can't really give you much about what this book is about. It is all covered in the synopsis, which is actually like a very well written synopsis with enough information, but like everything is done within these first 100 pages, which I really appreciate. But you want me to tell you the synopsis, that's why I'm here. This is about Hannah, who is starting at Oxford University, and her roommate is April, who is a very high society, very wealthy girl who has a bunch of stuff in her room, and they quickly bond by nature of being roommates. And Hannah is sort of integrated into April's group of friends, but you know right from the beginning that April is going to wind up dead. And you also know who was convicted of it, and he has recently died in prison, and there's some speculation as to whether or not he did it. Thankfully, I'm enjoying it. I was worried the first couple of pages I was just sort of skimming. It happens either when I'm too into a book or not into a book at all, that I'll just jump to the dialogue parts. So in this case, it was just to help me get into it. But thankfully, I'm in it now. I really like it. I like the way that John Neville is written. I think there's some interesting stuff that could go down there. The group of friends is small, but everyone is pretty distinct. It's also being told in dual timelines, which is fine. I don't think that the second timeline, the now timeline, is really adding anything. The now being 10 years later, and Hannah is pregnant, and some of the group keep in touch. There's some stuff going on with them, but I do kind of feel like in a story like this, the after or now, they're called before and after, the after timeline is unnecessary and just sort of fillery. Maybe unnecessary is the wrong word, because like this stuff is all coming out after the fact, and that makes sense in the realm of this. But the before timeline is just the much more interesting one, and the one that April is actually present for. And I do kind of have the wind knocked out of my sails whenever we are on an after section, because I just want to be in the before stuff. That's where all the interesting thing is. So far, definitely going well. A thriller is always hard, very dependent on the ending. I think this is going to be very classic thriller stuff, and I don't totally hate it. Honestly, that is the biggest thing at this point. I'm enjoying reading Ruth Ware. Like, when I read The Lying Game, I was checked out by 100 pages, and so I'm happy that that's not happening. Though Ruth Ware really does have a penchant for describing old decrepit houses. She's describing the grounds of Oxford and the way that the dorms look and stuff. It's very cool. It's also very British. There's actually quite a bit of stuff in here that I don't understand. This is going to be spoiler free, so this might be the most freely that I can speak about it, but that's okay. I'll probably update you next time on page 207. That's all I care about. Good morning. Last night I got to page 246 in The It Girl. Definitely more than I anticipated, but I was reading on the couch and the cat decided to come and cuddle me, so I was kind of trapped. For those of you who remember page 207, nothing. I'm so disappointed, and I keep trying to justify it by being like, maybe in a different edition page 207 does have something, but this is a brand new book. But it is going really well. I'm really enjoying it. Nothing's really happened. I feel like I could tell you most of what has happened in this book and it wouldn't really be a spoiler. I mean, like, discovering the clues. I am no closer to figuring it out. The only thing I'm good at in thrillers is identifying who it could easily be and then assuming it's not that person. But I've just caught up in the before time with the murder happening, so from here on out it should be all new, which I'm excited about. One fun thing in this is the main character Hannah is a bookseller in the after timeline, and so there's a lot of literary references. She's mentioned a bunch of fun stuff. All Beyond in the Dark is one that I loved, and I love that she took note of. There's definitely a challenge in here to read all of the books mentioned. I'm not going to be doing that, but someone else should. I don't think I love Hannah as a main character. I think that she's pretty flat, but I think that's kind of true for all of Ruth Ware's books, where the mystery is the most important thing, which I agree with. There are definitely like things that I'm picking up on, but I don't know what's gonna happen. I have zero guesses at this point. Okay, I have one guess, but it's not fully fleshed out. Also, Oxford sounds like a wild place. They have a bunch of words for stuff that already have names, but they decide to change them because they're at Oxford. It's very pretentious, but not in what they're studying. All of the students seem very grounded, like this isn't a secret history kind of thing. It's just they're at Oxford, and the pretension of Oxford seeps in. It's interesting because there are almost two mysteries going on, not quite, but one is whether John Neville did it and trying to prove or disprove that, and then there's also if he didn't do it, then who did? Which is really interesting. I really appreciate the cast of characters. I like that it's nice and small, but like still big enough. It still feels like there's a whole world out there. One thing I will say in this is that in the After timeline, the main character Hannah is pregnant, and the most recent Ruth Ware that I read before this was The Lying Game, which is an old release for her, but new for me. And that also featured a new mom and just like fretting about her daughter the whole time, and it was really annoying to read. Like fair, but not something I wanted to read about. This one has a fair amount of pregnancy stuff that seems to be ramping up. It was pretty minimal in the beginning, but slowly more and more baby talk is happening. If there are any real baby worries, I'll let you know, but so far it's just a major plot point. It's sort of the only thing that Hannah has going on in the After timeline. It's interesting too, having April is the girl who was murdered. She's a hard character to get a sense of. I'm sure that there's a bunch more secrets about her life or her family or something that are going to be revealed, because she is a party girl with a heart of gold, shall we say. And I think there's a lot of directions that this could go. I feel like it's probably not possible to guess at this point, but we'll see. I'll update you again. I don't know if I will finish the book. I've still got like 200 pages. Like it's a good chunky book, but I'm so glad that I'm liking it. I was very fearful and debating not doing this video, but I'm glad I stuck with it. If I had to put it in the ranking right now, it would definitely be in the top half. I'm tempted to put it second. I feel like it doesn't have as much going on as some of the other books, but I'm enjoying it a lot more. Like I don't have any negatives, maybe just a lack of positives. I highly doubt that this will usurp Turn of the Key, but there's always a chance it could go lower. Stay tuned to find out. Hello, we are entering the home stretch with the It Girl. I am on page 338, so I'll finish it today for sure, just not now. I was reading it at like 11:30 last night. I decided I should probably go to sleep, but I do really want to figure it out. Though I will say this is becoming less enjoyable. Remember last clip, 2 clips ago, I have no idea, where we had caught up with the current timeline where April had been murdered? I was anticipating the before and after would still happen and we'd get to see the after effects of the murder in the past. Hopefully the timelines are all making sense, but we're not. It's all switched to after timeline now. It's all when she's 10 years older. And I gotta say, I don't enjoy that as much because it's very much just a detective novel at this point. Like she's involved in it, but she's completely abandoned her day-to-day to just try to figure out this mystery. It's not bad, it's just a point of preference, and there was a new character introduced who I'm really enjoying. And I have a pretty good guess at who it is. You know when you think something and then the book, like the character also thinks it, but you still got like 80 pages left, so you're like, okay, so it's not that, obviously. But I have a guess other than that guess that I think is pretty good. Still enjoying it. I think I'm just feeling the length at this point. Like a normal thriller could easily be done at 338 pages, but we've got to go to 422, so I wonder if this is a Ruth Ware thing, if she often writes longer thrillers. I don't feel like it is, but who knows. Still sitting at a 4 probably right now, which is good. Much higher than I had anticipated. All right, let's wrap this thing up. I said that and immediately regretted it because I'm gonna have to decide where to put this in the ranking and I can't decide. First things first, I was right. The thing that I thought was the big reveal was the big reveal. The only thing that I don't like about this is that it does not have a villainous monologue, and I need that. I feel like it's important for understanding everything. Like, basically what happens is it is revealed the thing, but the explanation or like the reasoning isn't done, and it's just the main character being like, this is probably why. And I don't like that. I want to know from the horse's mouth or the horse's journal entry or the horse's family member exactly why they did the thing. To be fair, the book puts forth a very reasonable explanation of things that like you've already thought of along the way, but also, why am I being fair to the book? This is an entirely made up plot. I feel like the ending was just right though. The tension scaled just the right amount, got just the right amount of over the top. Maybe that's not even over the top, but maybe that's just right at the top where I wanted them to be. And I ended up really enjoying this. I think I'm gonna give it a 4 just because it's super solid, but I don't have a lot that's special about it. You know, it's a very standard thriller. I've read 90% of this book before. It's just little names and details have been changed, you know? But I think that this is a really strong outing for Ruth Ware. I think that in general we're on an upward trajectory, so I'm going to pick up whatever she puts out next. There was a moment there where I was worried that this was becoming me swearing off Ruth Ware, but it's not. So now here's the question. Is this better or worse than The Woman in Cabin 10? Which is so hard because The Woman in Cabin 10 is the first Ruth Ware that I read, what, 4 years ago now? I just don't remember it well enough. But I guess the question is, will this stick in my brain the same way that one does? And I don't think so. I think this was definitely the least atmospheric of her books. It's set at the college, but I didn't get a big sense of it. I feel like part of that is probably just a translation issue of like being British, and Oxford has their own names for stuff. They kept talking about stairwell 7 and like I don't understand why they're all in a stairwell. That never made sense to me. So I don't think that that's necessarily her fault, but I also don't think as much time was paid to the atmosphere as other things. But there's nothing wrong with it. Like, this is a very good book. There is one thing in here though that is like briefly mentioned about Neville that like never got readdressed, which I was really hoping to have addressed in the before timeline, but it didn't. I guess that's the one fault of it, but like I guess all thrillers have like the one thing that you want super answered. And I definitely don't think that me being able to have solved it knocks this down at all. I think that like it is still a very clever thing. I'm just a very clever gal. It's so hard because like I can think of flaws with The Woman in Cabin 10. I can think of things that really bothered me about it. There's nothing in here that bothered me. The one thing I mentioned bothered me, but it bothers me like 5%. It's not a big deal. And it's not like a plot inconsistency either. It's just something I wanted to delve further into. But is it as impactful as The Woman in Cabin 10? You're really testing my memory here. If I was smart, I would have done a reread. Every time I convince myself that I've decided, I immediately take it back and I'm like, no, it's actually better, or it's actually worse. You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna read my Goodreads review for The Woman in Cabin 10. Maybe that'll jog my memory, but I also have to remember where my phone is first. I have very mixed feelings about this book. Good start. I think I'd give it 3 stars because it's just okay, but it did make me cry, so that's at least a minimum of 4. This is something that I actually used to do. It's just like getting an emotion out of me automatically bumps you up, but I'm doing it less and less now, so That kind of sounds like it should be a 3. Made it difficult to distinguish guests from one another. Okay, so that's something that definitely wasn't a problem in the It Girl. There's this group of 6 friends and then a couple of like faculty and people who work at the college. And they are all very distinct and you're with them the whole time. You get a very good sense of the entire cast who could have done this. It's a fun book, not very deep, and the conclusion is satisfying enough. Those are a lot of the same things that I'd say about this book, but I think I didn't have the same problems. So I think I'm calling it. I think I'm saying this is the second best Ruth Ware book. Definitely does not hold a candle to Miss Turn of the Key. She is the queen forever and always. I'm challenging you, Ruth Ware, to write something better than that. I don't think it can be done, but we're gonna put this one in the second spot. I'm happy with that. I'm gonna regret it as soon as I hit stop, but I'm okay with it for right now. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. I hope that you enjoyed. I hope that it was less chaotic for you than it was for me. I think that's it. Here's the updated list. I think I'm confident in this, but maybe in a couple of years when Ruth Ware has a couple more books out, I'll be doing this again and the whole list will shuffle. But we don't have to worry about that right now. All we have to worry about is what we're gonna eat for dinner. And I don't know. Anyway, that's it for me. I hope that you enjoyed. If you have read The It Girl by Ruth Ware, let me know how you feel about it. Let me know how you feel about all of these if I'm totally off base with my ranking. I also do wonder if this one is more solvable than some of her other ones because I like it. I had it. Anyway, I'm just rambling at this point. Like, subscribe, comment, do the algorithmic things. Thank you and goodbye.